All right, well, we are a few minutes past 5:30, and we still have a couple more people to arrive, but I'd like to call this meeting to order. Suki, will you call the roll when you are
I
set
sure
up?
will.
Thank you.
Miss Balahi, Mr. Kleiss. Oh, he's off.
He's off.
That's incorrect. I thought I had the updated sheet. Miss Chorus,
Here.
Mr. Miles,
On his way. He's on his way.
Mr. Shuddy,
Present.
Ms. Wu.
Here.
Yes, we are missing Diane Kane
Miss Kane,
and Tegan O'Brien.
and Mr. O'Brien,
Here.
and then
Sarah Simsey.
Simsian. Okay.
All right, so the first order of business is approval of minutes from the previous meeting on May 17th, 2018. If you've had an opportunity to look them over, is there a motion to approve, or is there a motion on the floor? Yes?
I was there, but I'm not on this list.
Okay, so you'd like to correct that?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other corrections, additions to the meeting minutes? All right, I'll need a motion to approve unless you...
Also moved.
Second? All right, moved by Stan and
Stan.
seconded, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
And seconded by
Taken.
Tegan, thank you. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, those minutes are done. Additions to the agenda. Since we have some new people here, I'd like to add intros to the agenda. If there's, all right, no other additions to the agenda. I had overheard somebody say that they wanted to perhaps move something on the agenda. Did you want to
Well,
move one of the items?
The food truck thing I'd like to address, but it's at the end. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. I mean,
I'd like to move it on the agenda now, if that's okay.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, all right, so do you want to talk about that first before staff reports?
It's up to you.
Okay, all right, we'll go ahead and move the new business up before staff reports.
There is one potential time constraint, and I'll just monitor that for the board, but Marcus Ricci, the planner who's going to come present on what's in your square, he has an obligation at 6:30, I believe. So we'll want to make sure he can come up as well.
Do we want to change the order of that one too?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. So if everybody's okay with the introductions, we could start. I'm Mary Alice Wu, and I am on City Council, so I'm chair of this committee.
I'm Carol Mitten, and I'm the city administrator.
I'm Valerie Porras. I'm the community member on the board.
I'm Tegan O'Brien. I own Lucky PR Bakers, and I am a new board member.
Stan Shuddy, Triple S Farm, Bubba Vander.
I'm Gary Taylor. I'm just a spectator today. I'm the general manager of Common Ground across the street.
Kim Campbell, Campbell Apiaries from Charleston.
Rachel Storm, Public Arts Coordinator for the City of Urbana.
Brian Heaton, market coordinator.
Suki Reed, admin assistant for community development.
All right.
I'm Brandon Boyes, the economic development manager, and we were just joined by...
Hi, I'm Sarah Simzian. I'm with the Land Connection, representing community groups.
All right, excellent. Because I just moved something, let's go ahead and talk about the new business, which is recommendations to add an advisory board member representing food truck vendors. Who's going to talk about that?
I will. I'm going to refer you to the ordinance. In the original agenda order, we would have gone over the ordinance first. But on page 3 of the ordinance is where it defines the composition of the Market at the Square Advisory Board. And I understand the board has had prior conversations about this, but I did not seek to summarize those. Basically, Stan Shuddy requested that this be added to the agenda along with Shay Balahi and Kent Miles, that it be considered again. It's a business item because this is clearly something that the advisory board can take action on. And the action you'd be considering would be to recommend adding an additional category there on page 3 for the composition, presumably one prepared food or food truck vendor in good fiscal standing with the market, something along those lines. And so, Stan, perhaps you'd like to talk about your...
Yeah, I gave my argument.
Mhm.
When this strategic plan was initiated, we had one food truck, Fire Truck. So it wasn't that big a deal. But now, what is there, 6 to 8 weekly? So, you know, it's nothing to me, but I think it's a big deal because they have a considerable amount of income coming out of the market. So I think they ought to have a voice in what goes on, since they're, I don't want to say majority, but it just roughly in my head, I think they're 10 to 15, maybe 20% of the sales of the market consistently every week. So they need to have a seat at the table. That's just my own opinion. And then along that lines, I think on a strategic plan, on priority number 1 and action item number 1, it says encourage prepared food vendors to source local ingredients, especially those ingredients, blah, 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 blah. Well, they need to be here talking about that, because I think we would have a better market if they source more locally. But that's just my thing, but I've been trying to do this for quite a few years and always hit a roadblock. And Brandon finally listened to me and said he would bring it up, so I appreciate that, Brandon. That's about it.
All right, any discussion? So in order for that to happen, that would have to be sent to council for approval on the change of the ordinance, is that right?
That's correct. And so the board can make a recommendation to enact that, and then staff would follow up and bring that to a future city council meeting to amend the ordinance itself to add that category.
All right, any discussion about sending that to council for addition into this ordinance? Does anybody have any other thoughts besides Stan? Pros, cons?
I think that was a good point about if, you know, I think working towards getting the trucks to source more locally from the vendors would definitely be a benefit to the market. And I think that would be much easier to achieve if they felt like they were part of the process.
Okay, all right. Anybody else have any thoughts? So would we need a motion for that? All right, so if somebody would like to make a motion to ask staff to craft a change to the ordinance to send to city council, we could talk about that. But if nobody wants to make a motion, then that would not move forward.
I make such a motion.
Tegan makes a motion? All right, moved by Tegan,
I'll second.
seconded by Stan. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that moves forward. Excellent. And I do apologize, public input was supposed to be after the addition to the agenda, so let's go ahead and do public input. Is there anybody from the community that would like to speak to the board?
Just one quick input.
Can you give us your name, sir?
Kim Campbell, Campbell Apiaries from Charleston, Illinois.
Thank you.
Would we be able to have in our market email information for these meetings sent out?
Brandon?
In the market email.
Yes, so we have some advance notice, so the vendors have some advance notice in case they might want to come to the meetings.
Okay, we can consider that, but also the market sends out a lot more, or to a lot more users of the market, or users of the market are also accessed from our market mail, which is to customers as well. So we would consider adding that as well.
Okay, at the moment, don't the advisory board members get an email for an upcoming meeting?
Yes.
Okay. As far as I know, the only way that I can find out that there's a meeting is through one of the other members or
You can
the
request
calendar.
to be added to the email
Yeah.
list. So are you requesting that? Because I can follow up with you after
So
this
it's
meeting.
more generally known in advance.
I think that all the meetings are published online on the calendar, on the city calendar. It's
At
on
the last
website.
minute sometimes. I had to look for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, this one was one that was moved, but they should be set at the beginning of the year, all four of them.
This spring, when the meeting was canceled, it was also not on the calendar
Okay, all right.
until I asked about
There was
it.
a lot of transition going on there, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So
But-
I understand correctly,
still.
there is an addition to the calendar, sorry, Siki?
I don't know if it's open. Sometimes the calendar, I don't know, but if you go to the actual Market Advisory Board page, the meetings are listed there in advance. So I don't know, sometimes there's an issue with it getting transferred to the calendar itself, but if you go to the market page directly, they're listed there.
Okay. There were a couple pages on there that weren't available, and I didn't find that anywhere.
In addition, we have the ability to add you personally because of your interest to the distribution list for the board packet. So if that's
Yes,
of interest to
please,
you,
yeah.
I'll follow up with you after this meeting.
All right, any other public input? Okay, so let's move on to the staff report. The market coordinator, Brian, is going to present on the market operations.
Yes, that is the plan. All right, so. All right, so this year the market received 2 grants for the SNAP program. It's kind of a big draw to the market. We have traditionally got a grant from Farm Credit of Illinois, and it's been consistently in the amount of $5,000 for the last 3 years, I believe. We put those funds into circulation at the beginning of the market season. They are different from the other grant that we get in that they apply for any SNAP eligible food at the market. Those funds were fully distributed by July 21st, which is about average compared to past years. Our Link Up Illinois grant, we upped the amount that we asked for the total grant. We also increased the match that we give to patrons. So with the Farm Credit Illinois, we do a $20 match. So patrons can get $20 each market day. And we increased that to $25 for the Link Up grant. Those grants started distribution on the 28th of July, and to date we have distributed a little over $4,000. The Link Up grant does have a fair amount of reporting requirements for us, and we are expected to expend a minimum of just about $5,700 for the 28th season. So that includes time for a staff member to administer the program day of market, as well as reconcile the distributions the following Monday, and accounting cost to kind of keep track of that grant. And that number does not include my time spent in applying for the grant, which will be on next season's kind of tab. Attendance at the market. Attendance at the market has been a little unpredictable this season. We've had a number of very significant rain days where it has either rained for the totality of the market, much like July 14th to September 8th, or it was clear in the morning and then proceeded to rain from like 9:30, 10 o'clock on. So our average attendance is down overall. At this point, it's about 4,200 people per week. And I think we had a couple of highs over 6,000 for a couple weeks in August. Vendors. All right, to date, the market has approved 197 vendors for the 2018 season. A number of those were returning vendors, so that's not too surprising. New vendors, mostly arts and crafts and kind of prepared goods. A few prepared goods are still applying and being approved. 7 new growers were admitted to the market, and the growers vary in size from like just 2 or 3 acre farms to somewhat bigger productions, but nothing too significant. 3 new food trucks were introduced to the lineup at the market, and those were due mostly to food trucks kind of moving out of the market. When I relocated one of the vendors who had been occupying a food truck space, who it's questionable whether they're actually a food truck, so we relocated them and gave room for an additional food truck to come in. Let's see, 25 vendors were not admitted to the market due to space restrictions during their desired dates. So the market tends to be fairly full between the first week of June and the last week of August, first week of September. And a number of vendors had applied for those dates alone, and we were not able to accommodate them. Social media. The market has hired a consultant to coordinate its web and social media pages, Adam Wisniewski. So he kind of aggregated our web presence with Google and Yelp and all these other things, and kind of got that coordinated. He also posts content from the market on a regular basis. So he is out at the market quite frequently on Saturday. Some of you have probably seen him out there taking pictures and posting videos. And he also schedules posts to be released during the middle of the week so that we have more of a kind of ongoing regular presence on our Facebook page. And in addition to that, I have assigned a market staff member to respond to inquiries that come in over the Facebook page so that they don't kind of linger there longer than they have to. And that staff member devotes 2 hours a week. They're young, they're very efficient at it, so 2 hours a week sounds like not much, but they're really good. Our general social media stats are on the rise. I apologize, I didn't put like the latest. I'll aggregate the change at the end of the season, but for now, the Facebook follows are up. The Twitter and Instagram, those are either steady or holding up, and the market mail is steady compared to last year. Programming, chef demos. We have had 4 demos to date. We had 1 last-minute cancellation, and we could not kind of find a replacement for that. We have 1 demo left. People really get a kick out of these demos. I think it brings in a lot, and we've kind of coordinated with the people doing the demos to make sure that they mention frequently the vendors that they're sourcing some of their ingredients from at the market. So that's kind of worked out well. Let's see, we have 1 demo left, and we are trying to make arrangements to add 2 more demos during the less program days. So like when we have Read at the market or Sprouts at the market, like a demo would go along nice with that, and that it would not be noisy or distracting, but it would kind of just partner up nicely. So we're trying to like get some people in to do those. We've also made efforts to add additional programming on non-art at the market days so that we have live music present. And to date, we've had the Parkland College Wind Ensemble, and they will be back on October 6th, weather permitting. The Champaign Chamber Music Summer Program did like their final exam at the market, which, you know, I thought was a little mean, but also, you know, probably good for the students to get out and do that. The Urbana High School a cappella group, and there's 2 of them, came and performed at the market on May 12th, and they have contacted me, and we're going to try and coordinate a day for them to come back again, but apparently it's hard to coordinate the schedules of 12 high schoolers, so we're working on that. The Champaign-Urbana Symphony Orchestra, they came in. They had a special performance by one of their artists that had won a grant, and so she performed her piece. Part of the conditions of their grant was that she had to perform it in public, and we happened to run into one of the people from the orchestra, and we were talking about it, so we decided the market would be a good opportunity for that. So they came in on August 25th to perform that. Market staff. Staff numbers are down this season compared to last season. Last season we had 8 people that we could schedule. This season we have, last season we had 10 people we could schedule. This season we have 8. That includes myself. And we've had a bit of further staff turnover this season. So for now, we're not planning on hiring anyone else, but next season we will likely hire so that we have 9 people to pull from for staff. 10 seemed a little bit too much, 8 not quite enough. Patron feedback, some common concerns at the market, the use of plastic bags and disposable food packaging by vendors. This is kind of a perennial favorite. It came up quite forcefully at the end of last season, and this season started out just as strong with it. It seems regardless of our efforts to give away bags, it still is disturbing for some people that there are even plastic bags offered at the market. Concerns about prices of produce have been mentioned on more than one occasion. People understand that it's organic and that it's local and they should support it, but they don't really want to pay the prices. So I hear about that. I tell them those things exactly. It's organic, it's local, support your local business, it's great. The desire to have dogs in the market, oh my gosh. We have banned dogs for, what now, going on 7 years maybe?
Probably,
6?
yeah, my first season.
And people still swear that last year it wasn't that way. So we are trying to police the dog situation. There is equal support for it and against it from vendors. I know this is a big thing. Not so much from vendors, sorry, from patrons. But those people with the dogs, they're getting wily. They're figuring out that if they come in the back way to the market, they can avoid the market staff. Had a couple of people note that it is a hazard to cross Vine Street, and I have seen that hazard in action crossing the 4 lanes of traffic between the market and the city building, which are the official restrooms of the market, which sounds weird. And I don't know, we're kind of looking into a couple of things that could be done with that. And then the lack of shaded areas and seating areas where people can kind of gather and just relax at the market continues to be an issue. We believe that a formal survey of patrons would assist us in kind of more comprehensively assessing patron feedback as to like what they would like to see at the market and how we could best kind of provide that to them. I think that does it for my staff report.
All right. Any questions?
Would you know approximately how many food trucks?
Sir, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Can we ask those questions later? Because you're part of the public, correct?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
He has.
I'm sorry.
He has.
Yeah. No. It's a little odd in this room
Okay.
because we have board members and public
Okay.
mixed in. So, but we can follow up afterwards. Are there any other questions from the board? Yes.
Yeah.
Dan. Sorry.
Stan Chevy. On the survey, could you include the advisory board on those questions you're going to ask? Especially the vendors, you know, and the people that are involved in it, because we're boots on the ground.
We have a later agenda item that's entirely about preparation of surveys.
Okay, thanks.
This was just anecdotal feedback that
Yeah.
the staff currently
Yeah.
receive.
Hagan, did you have a question? No?
Oh, I did.
Sarah, sorry.
Valerie.
Oh, I'm trying to
That's
keep
okay.
track.
Related to the SNAP, the increase in the match from 20 to 25. So I'm just curious how that information gets out to organizations that work with SNAP families. Because this is news to me, and it would have been helpful to know all summer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We probably neglected to update some of our materials that we send out. That grant kind of came through after the season had started, like we had official notice of it, so I hadn't updated those materials. We make a point of telling everybody that comes to the market, and we do other advertisements since then. We've updated it.
Is this pushed out through social media?
Yes, I believe it is. It was.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions from the board to staff? Yeah.
Taking it right. So, given the current trajectory, when do you expect to run out of Link of Illinois funds?
In all
It doesn't
likelihood-
seem to be that far off.
Yeah, in all likelihood, we will have excess funds that will roll over to next year, so our ask will be smaller from them. Plus, some of those funds do go towards the cost of defraying the cost of advertising and kind of printing material, so there's still money to be removed from that total that just hasn't been included here. That's strictly the amount of funds. There's probably another $800 in printing costs that we come out of those fund totals.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, Public Arts Coordinator, Rachel.
I'm going to open a presentation. There's not a lot of words on it. It's just pretty things for you to look at. Of your market. Hello, I am the Public Arts Coordinator for the City of Urbana. And as Brian discussed, there is a second Saturday of the month every month that we have art at the market. And just a really brief little background on our public arts program. We've been doing art at the market, I think, for as long as our program, nearly as long as our program has existed. And we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year for the Urbana Public Arts Program. We have a 9-member advisory commission, and we meet every second Tuesday of the month if you ever want to join. I want to mention just briefly that our Art at the Market, and then more recently our Art in the Square programs, which is us going inside the indoor farmers market as well to offer some concerts and arts workshops, are programs that we have really celebrated and look forward to also working with you to continue to grow. But they're one of a number of programs that we offer through the arts program. We manage grants, and so one of the biggest components of our public arts program is regular granting of individual groups, nonprofits, and festivals in the area. And then we have quite a number of other programs. I won't go into these today, but I wanted to just share those with you so that you can also situate the Art at the Market initiative in the realm of all the other things the arts program does. It is probably one of the things that keeps me busy in the summer. But let's talk a little bit about Art at the Market. And I'll just kind of share a little bit about what Art at the Market has consisted of, what this summer looked like, and some of the challenges we encountered, some of the exciting things that happened. And then I also want to just take a moment to kind of get some feedback from you and in doing kind of some collective dreaming about what you would like to see at the farmers market in terms of activation around the arts, because it really is designed to enhance the farmers market and the things that all the vendors are doing as well. So let's begin by saying the farmers market, as I said, is every second Saturday Art at the Market. We have it as a 9:30 a.m. performance. I'll mention that the next one that we have coming up is actually on the 29th of this month. You'll note that is not a second Saturday. That is because we were rained out this month and we made the rain call early, which was a really good decision because it totally rained. And we were actually able to move both the musician, which is Sora Rise, and the Make Art Not Trash workshop with the Idea Store on recycled art making. So that's really exciting. You'll see us on the 29th. But I also want to mention that we've had quite a diversity of things. As I said, the performance is always at 9:30 in the morning, but actually from 8 a.m. to noon, we have some sort of arts workshop, and we do that in collaboration with a local organization. So for instance, this summer has included a kind of pop-up adventure playscape with Coop Adventure Play, which invites youth to kind of explore with raw materials and build their own kind of playscapes. They can paint, they can do everything. It's really child-guided. COOP stands for Kid Owned and Operated Play. So the adults are really there just to make sure no one truly gets hurt. We also had screen printing with Wise Camp Screen Printing, veggie stamping with the Land Connection and Sarah, thank you very much. We also have a Make Your Own Monster for October with Melissa's Monsters, just a local artist. So we really try to have kind of thematic and diverse artistic and creative disciplines represented. Similarly with the music, we spend a lot of time trying to plan having really quite a diverse variety when it comes to genre, cultural groups represented, etc. So this year we had salsa, we had Congolese gospel, we had jazz, we had bluegrass, we had samba, and we have folk music. And all that said, I do want to share a couple of things about this summer, because even though I'm going to show you some lovely photos from this summer, and I've tried to also improve our little kind of corner of the market with lots of family-friendly things to entertain children so that adults can kind of go and meander around the market and then spend some time there. So we had things like hula hoops and chalk and bubbles and coloring book pages to supplement even the arts activity that was happening there, so there's just more going on. But we also did experience the drama of the rain this summer. At a certain point, a frustrated me burst into Brian's office and almost said I wanted to cancel Art at the Market, because we were at one point, I think, rained out 4 in a row of these concerts. So a lot of them got to start playing and didn't quite get to finish. And so it was really a challenge weather-wise this summer. That is probably the biggest challenge that we encountered. I want to talk, however, about the importance of art at the market, because even in reading over the market's strategic planning document, we can see that there are key priorities that I think art at the market really helps move forward. Things like enhancing the customer experience, fostering social gathering spaces at the market, customizing offerings for all ages, and coordinating increased events that really keep people at the market for longer than just a quick visit. And that is not everyone, right? We have some patrons that want to get in and get out, and we've got some patrons that might want to hang out, and the farmers market really feels like a spot. And I'm actually in the latter category. Usually, even before I took this position, I was one of those people that like to hang out at the Urbana Farmers Market, that it's just like the place to be on a Saturday in Urbana. So we really kind of keep that in mind when we're thinking about programming and planning. I just want to invite kind of some conversation, and I'll say some of the things that we experimented with this summer was a stage for the first time ever. You'll note that it existed there for a while and then it did not, and part of that was due to cost, and because we had gotten rained out so many times too, it spent significant time, staff time, labor to get that stage up. We were collaborating with the Park District to use their stage, and one of the things that it presents a challenge is that stage, of course, is one that is not owned by the city, and so we have to kind of train our staff to use it, and there was different staff people using it each week, and I was the continuity, as was Brian. So we were actually educating people on how to set up a stage almost every Saturday. It was just a little bit of a challenge. So we tried that for a little while, and through costs and labor, we decided to forego it. But the reason why I tried it was because, to me, one of the challenges that I experience as the person who organizes art at the market is the feeling that it's somewhat invisible. And that might sound surprising to a vendor that may feel like art at the market's too visible or something. But actually, I can't, as a patron, I wouldn't have known that it was organized by the Urbana Public Arts Program. There wasn't like a ton of signage and things. I wouldn't have necessarily understood that it's different from buskers that are in the corners throughout the market. And I really wanted to do something, because we spend money to hire musicians and artists to produce these things at the market, and we want to make sure that they feel in a way elevated, literally and figuratively. So that's why we invited the stage. And that is still something that I am invested in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a stage, but thinking about like what differentiates somebody who's performing a scheduled concert at the farmers market, and someone who is just busking on the corner, which is wonderful, but it's not the same, and it's not actually curated currently by the Public Arts Program. The people who sign up to busk sign up with Brian, so it's a different route altogether, and it's a first come first served situation. Ours is very curated. The other thing is that, we join the chorus of people who say there needs to be more shade. The farmers market is a very hot place, especially for artists to be making work from 8 a.m. to noon and entertaining children, which takes a lot of energy too. And so we have our tents and things, but it really does become a challenge even for patrons who want to sit and listen to a concert. It's uncomfortable if it's 90 degrees and the heat's burning down. And then, I just mentioned already, but signage, having it be clearer for folks is something that we're thinking about. And, I personally would love to hear a little bit from you. So I've got some questions that I want to ask you to kind of get a sense of what do we want to see in terms of a future for arts activation at the farmers market. Because I think at its most ideal, it should be something that really invigorates what's already wonderful and happening at the market. And we want to make sure that we keep moving towards that direction. So with that in mind, I have a couple of questions, and the first one is really just an open-ended question. I want to know, firstly, I would love to know if you notice that there's art at the market, or if you notice too much that there's art at the market, but I'm curious about what does it look like when it's been at its best to you? And you can say it as art at the market, or when the relationship between the art at the market and the farmers market, for instance, everything else that it has going on, when does it feel most maybe synergistic or most valuable together?
When you say when, what do you mean when?
Like, what does it look like when it's like that?
Say when it looks full.
Yeah, when it looks
that-
full.
When that the drive-in that's blocked off, when it looks actually activated,
Hmm.
you notice it more when it looks barren and tent here,
Mhm.
sort of tent off to the side. You notice that it is not activated.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe don't be afraid to overprogram a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because that engages more customers and doesn't feel like an empty space.
Other thoughts? I would love to hear like what you've noticed about art at the market. And many of you who are vendors or patrons probably have, you know, an agenda all your own, obviously, at the farmers market. So I don't expect that you're paying attention to the art at the market necessarily. But I came to a farmers market commission meeting earlier this year, and I talked a little bit about. Well, I wanted to get some feedback from you all then, and we introduced kind of the agenda for the farmers market this summer. And so I was interested in kind of having a follow-up conversation with you. We're at the end of the summer. I actually only have one more after the one that's next week, or the weekend after next. So I'm almost towards the end, and I'd kind of like to hear like how it's gone for you. Do you notice it? Does it impact you positively or negatively?
Well, you know, I don't get away from our table, it's just too busy. But my view is, if the customer's happy, they're gonna spend more.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, because I think art and food goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So it hits us at different levels, but still. But anyway, I think it's a win-win. But personally, no, I don't get away because time I
You
get
don't
my
stop in
staff-
salsa for 2 minutes?
No, because time I get my staff and everything going, that's, yeah.
The only time that happened was a real brief pause from a few of the vendors at Blue Moon. Came over and danced for 2 minutes and then went back. It's hard to get away from your stand.
Because I'm way over here anyway.
You are also, yeah. And I'm curious, like for those who are further away or closer, any other any concerns, anything that you like or dislike? I mean, we talked about, well, here's one thing. I amplified it this summer, and I amplified it for the first time ever. And I didn't hear a single complaint, but that to me doesn't mean that they're not necessarily there. So I was curious to ask you about sound, and if it went fine, if you could hear what you're doing. I still kept it to a minimum, but because we want to be mindful that people need to be able to hear each other and talk and make sales, but we also really want it to be kind of like the happening place in Urbana on a Saturday. So any feedback on the amplification?
Well, if I was close, I wouldn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
We were fine in aisle 2,
Mm-hmm.
so
I wouldn't know what it's like.
I personally checked in with aisle 1, so they I know.
Street musicians that get a little bit carried away.
yeah.
So, you know, it's like, really? But after a while, you just tone them out. It's like a train, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? You know?
There's a ukulele.
Yeah. And some of them are good. I enjoy them. I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong.
Well, but it has come up before about like whether the arts program should assist in curating the buskers a little bit more. The thing that we've done is sort of reserve the buskers for first come, first serve, anyone can play. And then we try to be mindful about where we put them based on what we know to be the wants and desires of vendors that are there.
And I think the music being in that, it's separated a little bit, and there's usually quite a sound barrier with the different trucks parked behind the booth there, that I don't think the sound is. I think sound is typically harder for vendors when they're right across from you, because then it's really competing directly with you talking.
Also, you guys were broadcasting sound away from the market, if I remember.
We were, however, I don't know that, I'm kind of on the fence about whether I really like our setup, to be honest, even though it's nice that it's a corridor. To me, I'm just thinking about like what would a market look like at its very best, and I would want it to feel like an experience, and I wouldn't want it to feel as disjointed as I think sometimes our market accidentally feels, where it's like we've got the kind of community groups and trucks all, like in a way I almost feel like the arts should be more towards the arts and crafts folks, like that we're kind of in a corridor together, but we've got kind of we've got a different setup, and then I do face it away from the market, which kind of faces the outside and is in a nice kind of welcoming sort of way. But then once people are in the market, it feels like our backs are to what's happening in the market. So that's been kind of a question mark in my mind a little bit about what would be the best setup for it. Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap up,
Mhm.
so we have time for
Real quick, kind
Yeah.
of comment,
Yeah.
and it has to do with Mark. Keep this in mind when we redo the venue, the arts being in that part of the facility, however that's designed. Because you talked about the weather. Believe me, it affects us too.
Oh, I know.
So I want a roof over my head.
Wouldn't we love a permanent structure?
Well, we'll have to talk about that.
I know. It's true. Okay, I'm just flipping through photos, but I am done. Thank you for your time, and I do want to ask you to keep this an open dialogue with me. I try to be very accessible. You can find my email on the Public Arts page, but it's Rachel Lawrence Storm, so my email is rlstorm@urbana-illinois.us, and I would love to hear from you if you have ideas, if you would like to see something different, if you wanted to vocalize in this meeting but not quite so publicly that you had a feedback piece, I'd love to hear about it. And I thank you for letting me come present today.
Thank you. All right, we're going to change things and have Marcus give us an update. And you have to be gone at 6:30, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have a lovely zoning board of appeals meeting to
No,
go
you
to.
do.
So I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you folks and share what we are finding in the What's in Your Square program. Have a little bit of data to show you. So before we get into that, the What's in Your Square program is a public outreach and engagement project that we've been working on since probably April of this year, and it's trying to find out what the public would like to see happen at the 9-block area where the farmers market happens, including the mall, the Landmark Hotel, both of which are privately owned and operated, as well as all of the parking lots that are city owned. It's 9 blocks, I think it's over 17 acres. We are surveying the public as well as many different city agencies and organizations about what they'd like to see over there in the square. But also what they have liked in the past about the square, what brings them to the square. We had over 44 outreach events this summer in that 4 months. And it ranged from going to events like Read Across America and the Community Supported Agriculture event, doing little short surveys. We also had some longer events where we had visioning exercises and had people draw things on maps, which I believe the Market Advisory Board participated in one of those, which was really helpful. And we ended up with over 1,600 surveys submitted from Champaign and Urbana residents, current and former residents. Approximately 80% of those were done through an online survey, 20% of them were done in person in an event. And so we asked them a bunch of questions, and this is preliminary data. Nobody else has seen this besides a few key city staff. And it changed even from this afternoon. So we'll see if I can find you something that's useful to show you. So over here in the black graph, we asked folks, what is the best thing about the Lincoln Square site today? The biggest thing was business. 591 people voted for business. Now, you could vote on as many different things as you thought were important to you, so it wasn't like you could only vote on one thing. So the biggest, most important thing to people was business being there. The second highest was actually the farmers market, and I say actually because there were two that were tied pretty close, farmers market and the location. So a lot of people thought it was really important that the square is downtown Urbana. And then that's followed by things like events happening there, people being able to do physical activity, a bunch of other things, that it's a reflection of Urbana's character. But the second most important thing was that the farmers market is there at the square. So, good job on you all. Another of the questions we asked was, what is the single biggest change you'd like to see at Lincoln Square? Probably the most important thing was changing some things that are currently about it. But nobody really mentioned changing the market as being a significant thing that they would like changed about it. So that, to me, as a planner, indicates that people are, by and large, happy with how it's being run and managed right now. See, another graph that has been moved, which I will share with you verbally because it was here this afternoon. Other comments where people said things that they like about the square that weren't included in any of our other answers. The most important things were business. 25% of the people thought that business at the square was important, and then entertainment being at the square. So, like I said, this is preliminary data, but it's very important, obviously, to people that the farmers market is a thing and that it happens in downtown Urbana. That's really the meat and potatoes and asparagus of my presentation. And I'm available for questions if you have them on this preliminary findings. We also did some mapping exercises, which I can't share, but one of the main point of that was having people show us what they liked where on the square, the 9-block square. A lot of them said expanding the market. A lot of them said an indoor market function. A lot of them said disperse the market throughout more of the currently parking area and adding in other things around them so that it's not siloed off in a thing, but it's integrated in other things like housing functions. So we hope to have this data analysis wrapped up by the end of the month, by the end of September, and then we'll be bringing a final product and some ideas back to the organizations that we got information from earlier this summer. So are there any thoughts or comments you have that you'd like me to take back to the data team? Okay, you're all perfectly satisfied with the project?
Said they didn't want no changes. What was that about? What? I forget which category.
That was...
Because my question is, what options do they have to put down on the survey? I mean, if there wasn't an option on there, obviously they're not going to...
So these were open-ended questions. People,
Okay.
It was a blank slate, and they could write in whatever they wanted.
That's all I need to know.
And so some of them said...
Yeah, it was modified.
Right.
That's what it was, yeah.
You know, so somebody might have said more business, different business.
Gotcha, okay.
Other folks said we like what's there, but do more of X or less.
I thought
of
you had
X.
multiple choice.
Right now,
Okay.
yeah, we had a few multiple choice things, but we were really most concerned with getting people's unsolicited comments.
Gotcha.
Marcus, so the one where they said, what are the things that you like?
Yes.
You had the check all, right? There you go.
Yes.
So is that just consolidation of the blue graph?
No.
No,
it's a
that's
completely different question.
So that was a different question. Was it a check all that apply, or was it fill in the blank?
This was a checkoff.
Okay.
And you said they could check multiple.
Right, yeah. And,
But it ended up pretty
this,
close.
this open-ended one, they could fill in as much as they wanted, and we
Gotcha.
counted every
Okay.
sub-answer as a separate answer.
But the market still ranks up there.
Oh, yeah, yes. Location and a market is what people like about the square.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you
Good luck
for-
at the zoning meeting.
Thank you. And thank you for moving things around so I could talk tonight.
All right.
Will we be included in the, after you get it all together?
Yes,
The
yeah.
advisory committee, or is that a branding question?
I think that's primarily a Brandon question.
Okay.
But we are,
We
we
can talk
serve,
about it later
Yeah,
then.
and you got this information before anyone else because you don't meet frequently, so thank you to Marcus.
I don't know
Sure.
nobody, so I
Yeah.
you folks have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good marketing work.
Thank you.
All right, Brandon, do you want to go over the financials?
So there was a one-page summary. So this is our new financial system, Munis, and this is a fiscal year report. So this is fiscal year FY18, so that's July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. So this is one of the challenges of keeping track of market funds in the city system is that our fiscal years straddle two markets. So this is the end of last year's market and the beginning of this year's market. So I'm going to go over a little bit of it with you, but right now we don't have a lot more detail than this. We transitioned in February, and so all the detail in the system prior to that doesn't exist in the new financial system. Not all the detail was carried forward. And then we started generating detail in here, but we've made some mistakes already in the system, and we also haven't made use of some of the better tools that are available. Mainly it's called Project Ledger, and that's going to allow us to actually track by the market year and track by our programmatic categories rather than these basically accountant-defined things. And we also kind of suffered some loss of information because the transfer from the old chart of accounts to the new, they smushed lots of lines together, so we lost a lot of information in that process. So let me just go over what we have right now. This is the Farmers Market Fund report. So we actually are a separate special fund at the city, separate from the general fund. And the advantage there is that if the market is successful in making money, it's retained in your fund. So unlike pretty much any other city program, the revenue that comes in excess of the costs accrues in one place, and it's very easy to keep track of. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed able to spend that. We still have to get council approval. It has to be budgeted, but that's what's going on here. So you'll see we had more revenue than was expected, and we had actually downgraded the revenue from 98,000 to 90,000. I think we were just trying to be more conservative, but we exceeded those expectations and ended up even above the original budgeted amount. The next section of the budget says economic development. This is holdover from this fund's prior life, which was an economic development fund that also included the farmers market. And over a couple of years and a lot of meetings, we got the other uses moved out, and this is the only one left. So this is actually some historic preservation money, but it's just going to hang out there till it's spent, and then it'll be all farmers market from then on. Then in the expense category, you'll see that we were down about 25% from what was budgeted. And I'd say that's probably entirely accounted for by staffing turnover. That's a really significant reduction. Those are the larger line item amounts, and also related things like insurance and travel education. Also, you might have noticed on the revenue at the top there was local grants, and we didn't have anything there. We were supposed to have about 1,300, but then down in the expenses there's a line called grant miscellaneous contracts, and that one was a negative number, meaning it was revenue, not an expense to the budget. So for whatever reason, that's how finance decided to show the funds coming in there in the expenses rather than the revenues. So that's where that is, if you had a question about that. But again, and then this all totals up to the fact that the fund increased its revenue by $52,000. So the fund balance there at just above the bottom. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. The fund balance increased by about $10,000 from $41,000 previously to $52,000. So I misspoke. So that's a pretty large increase. This fund, I don't have the exact numbers here, but it's decreased in its balance by $10,000 to $15,000 a year, and originally that was what it was projected to do, was to further decline. And working with Brian closely and Sterling before that, we were able to kind of right-size that a little, and well, staffing turnover helped. However, because this, again, straddles 2 fiscal years and all these weird things have happened with the financial system, we don't have very good clarity at this time about the financial performance of the market. It looks good, but if staffing expenses come up closer to their normal level, you know, 10,000 isn't a lot for, in terms of staffing expenses. But we have some money there that's accrued, but we want to make sure that we're in a position to kind of sustainably sustain some revenue accrual in this fund to do the things we're going to be talking about in the next phase of this, which are, you know, facilities and infrastructure improvements for the market. Any questions about that?
Questions?
How secure from year to year your funding and stuff with the city is that, as far as getting your money in?
I mean, that's the other thing we accomplished over, that's a longer time frame of about 5 years, is we have transitioned the entire market coordinator staffing cost is now borne by the farmer's market. So that was not the case for many, many, many years that the city has directly supported the farmer's market. But we got to a point where now it's effectively an enterprise fund, meaning it's a two-sided thing. I mean, it's beneficial because if we raise revenues, we have a case to make about why the city council should allow us to spend those monies on the farmers market. But on the other hand, if we aren't able to perform, then we are going to be expected to bear those cuts directly.
So to summarize, the only thing that is on the city budget that's not on this enterprise fund would be items such as your time. Everything else is funded, so it's a self-supporting fund right now. Okay.
My time, Suki's time, Rachel's time. And there's definitely overhead that is borne, you know, through the processing of the financial system. Yeah, all staff directly reporting.
Supplies, all of that. What about like Public Works? Public Works has to set up anything, is that billed back to the farmer's market?
Not at this time, there's not internal billing.
So that's just an infrastructure stuff. Okay.
Did I hear you right then, after this year, you're gonna have a market year summary so we can look at that?
Yeah.
Instead of fiscal year?
We will be able to run reports on the market year. Right. And we will also be able to, instead of these general line items, we'll have the programmatic project lines. So, I don't know if we've determined what all of those will be, but like art at the market or, you know, specific programs, things that should be more recognizable to you.
Dog bites.
Mm-hmm. Dog, yeah, there you go, insurance. Yeah. Insurance.
All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you up next to that?
Yep.
All right, so let's see here, economic development. Brandon will discuss next steps and ask the advisory board to provide input on the future of the market's facilities.
So there's a sheet I handed out today that says the 2019 facility visioning, large print on the top. And so this is what I want to talk to you about. It's drawing upon the conversation the advisory board had at its last meeting and the What's in Your Square effort that Marcus just presented.
Excuse me, Brandon.
Yes.
I didn't get a copy of that.
Can you make sure you get one? Here. Take one. There's one in there, too.
They're all down here.
Sorry, yeah, they're off the table, but I think everybody got one? Okay, you need one too?
No, I got one.
So, why now, right? Follow up to What's in Your Square. The farmer's market is a major draw to Lincoln Square. It's confirmed by that survey. It's like we already knew, but really if you kind of step back and think about what are attractions for downtown Urbana, the farmer's market really stands out as perhaps the, you know, one of the most significant singular draws to our downtown compared to other businesses. However, it only, you know, happens one day a week during in season, but it really is of a magnitude, and especially amongst the city's programs, we sort of have nothing like it by comparison. And some of the topics we talked about when this board did the visioning exercise for the What's in Your Square initiative, we wandered into a lot of concepts about public space and the use of public space. You heard Rachel talk a lot about that in the way she's thinking about the Art at the Market programming, and you might have seen it up there in some of the responses that people wanted green space, they wanted entertainment, You know, there were a number of ideas along those lines as well. So there's a convergence of needs here that any facility of the farmer's market, it isn't necessarily, that infrastructure is going to be there 7 days a week, in and out of the season. Changes. The hotel just there's a high bidder from the auction. We'll see what becomes of the sale in, I think, 30 to 45 days. Lincoln Square is undergoing a big change in its current tenant mix. There's some new projects that we hope to be having underway soon, including residential development immediately to the north here. And then the city is undergoing a big, deep questioning of its facility needs through a facility study that's really going to be going underway. And all this sort of points back to our farmers market. Here it's the biggest outside of Chicago and clearly the best in the whole state. But when you look at our facility, it's mediocre. I mean, there are a lot smaller towns that have a lot nicer, run a lot smaller markets and have a lot nicer facilities than we do. We have a parking lot with a little bit of ornamentation, a little bit of seating, and a little bit of extra electrical outlets and some banners. But there are a lot of practical considerations, I'll run through those here, that we need to look at as a group. And we've got to start with the biggest one, which is, should this be the current, or should the current location be the permanent home of the farmers market? I'm not lobbying to change it, but in this bigger context, you know, we're going to see as those What's in Your Square initiative responses come back, what kind of the public had to say about it. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of creative ideas. But we really can't, in earnest, pursue a campaign to make investment in this infrastructure until we really answered the question, you know, are we certain this is where we want to make that investment? Because we're not going to be able to change that. The infrastructure specifically, I have a long list there. I think Rachel practically gave this presentation for me already, just running through her mind what she thinks about as a programmatic organizer for an event in the market. Seating, I think she kind of talked about all those uses, a stage, play area for kids, shade from the sun, and not just for patrons, but also vendors, as Sam was saying. Cover from the weather to help us reduce the number of cancellations or give vendors more
Well, look at the
motivation.
attendance chart. Weather's everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know, yeah. So that says it right there.
Then trash and recycling, those facilities. Electricity, that puts a lot of constraints on where folks can be located. Access to and from the site. You know, there's sort of this parade that happens in the morning to get everybody in and then to get everybody out. And if we were going to design a site from scratch, we'd probably have more than one entrance or exit, right?
Parade, he's being kind.
What's that?
The word parade, he's being kind. Brian probably has
He's the conductor.
other words. Yeah.
Safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. Brian's brought up that, you know, it's an anecdotal point, but we have a non-ADA accessible 4-lane pedestrian crossing in front of the city building. I use it to go get coffee at the co-op all the time, but we really shouldn't be encouraging people to walk across the street in that way, even though it's right across.
Just make it 2 lanes.
Yeah. And there might be things we could do in short term, but in a long-term sense, we need to answer that. We need people coming to the market to feel safe. The parking needs, both short-term and long-term, I think Rachel mentioned that as well. Market layout, we're constrained. You know, we're tight on that site when everybody's there, and it's like that puzzle where there's only all the little squares and there's only one piece missing, and you have to put the picture together based on that. That's the game Brian's sort of forced to play right now when he's trying to make accommodations for vendors. One move can affect multiple others. The traffic itself, just traffic around the site, signage for the site. If we're going to consider serious investment in the infrastructure, we have a 1% for the arts provision with the city, so that's an opportunity to incorporate some physical public art as well into any infrastructure. And lastly, I already mentioned it, there's that general need for a public plaza. So the farmer's market could potentially be part of a bigger solution.
Right.
It could be public-private, but I don't feel like this advisory board has been in a position to make a very specific statement about the future facility needs in our strategic planning process or
No.
that kind of thing.
Not until we see what all the input and everything comes in, you know, and then sit the mayor down and say, okay, what do you want? And then when we talk, you know, we can give our perspective, but what she wants is more important. I mean, you know, you know what I'm saying.
Are you saying that you would like to react to something as opposed to doing something that's more blue sky, which is that you just imagine what you could do without any constraints?
I don't want to be part of a process which has happened on this exact board, advisory board, where we sit down and ask for our input, and we go 2 hours. At the end of the meeting, they flip out a chart, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of that, and I've talked to Brandon very much about that.
Mhm.
I'll be a part of the visioning. I love visioning, but I don't want to be, you know, a deal's already made, and this is what we're going to do. You know, and I've talked to Diane quite a few times, and she has a vision. So she needs to be in the room too. You know, we can only give it from our perspective as vendors, you know, what we see talking to our customers. So, but I think, and I don't, maybe you already did this, but I think you need to take some road trips and look at some other places.
That's good.
You know, Soulards is one, you know, in St. Louis. I mean, there's some others. But get a little bit under your belt, because, you know, we can copy other people. Raquel, what's her name at Farm Bureau?
Regella?
Regella. You need to get hold of her, because she's got very, you know, she was in this world. And she could give you some places or some people to talk to anyway. We don't need to make mistakes, you know, that other people's already made.
Mhm.
But no, I want to be part of the visioning. I just don't want the vision already set.
Absolutely.
So no, I love that. But I think his last line right here, general city need for a public plaza, hits the nail on the head. Because you can't make money at the farmer's market one day a week. The things that create revenue, you know. So, and a flat surface parking lot don't do that very much. So, you know, you need something that's going to create income year round, which maybe you could have permanent vendor stalls, because some of these markets do. Say Kent wants to sell flowers 7 days a week. He rents that out, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's things like that could be potential. Maybe I want to go more than one, just a Saturday. So, anyway, I'll shut up.
I got a place you could go more than just Saturday.
Huh?
I know somewhere you could go more than just Saturday. When it comes to the infrastructure amenities list, I think another important consideration would be some sort of permanent food prep and washing space, given the demanding nature of our environmental health department, because that is one of the things that has come up with discussions with them, is there could potentially be annual permits granted for sampling and cooking demonstrations if we had ready access to a commissary on site that cannot be even a walled tent. It has to be more permanent.
Right. That's an income
So
stream.
drainage, sink, a basic counter would pretty much be sufficient, but
That's an income stream.
and that
we
would be
could have.
huge for I think all of the food vendors, and would really add a lot to the market.
That's a great suggestion, thank you. Also, that raises public restrooms, and that should be on that list as well. That's very important. And then to Stan's point, you know, I think our goal is not to necessarily, it's to identify all these needs, but then to then step back and say, well, what data, what quantitative data and qualitative data can we collect to, you know, so this board is positioned to make some good decisions and recommendations moving forward. And that's really what the remainder of this document is talking about, is that there's a process we will need to go through internally with staff to start setting that up. That we need to be concerned about approvals, funding, and staffing levels to achieve these things. So we really, I'm thinking we really can't engage in this till the 2019 season, and we're going to be using the time before that to prepare. We need to be concerned about how we design these surveys and try to make it as statistically significant as possible and conduct them in a way that you know, we have results that we can rely on. That it will probably include paying for some software. It will mean investing staff time and potentially money into data collection, and I've got more info on that. We have to spend time analyzing the data after we have it, and sometimes we might need to do things like mapping, and I think Stan made a great recommendation too that should be added to this list, is we need to do site visits and case studies to, add, to further flesh out what are the options. So on the back, there's a little more detail about.
I like road trips, you need somebody to go along with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have as many advisory board members as possible if we were to do something like that. So this is just a snapshot of what it might look like, and I'm really just compiling all the ideas that I've heard from you all at prior meetings and just conversations with staff. Day of surveys is something we'd be really interested in doing. Getting that information freshly from the vendor, having this on a tablet or something, having ideally market staff or volunteers trained so that this can happen every market all season long, and we can really learn from that process, or at least a sampling of days. The specific populations, UIUC students as a group, because they're a transient population, there is a perpetual need to educate and convince students to come out to the market. And in general, it's from my armchair, I think that they're a population that we could see more of at the farmers market. And so that's really an opportunity for growth, but we need to learn something more, I think, about that population and how to better reach them. WIC and SNAP recipients as a group, and Valerie just brought that up again, but we need to be deliberate in that outreach. And also minority populations in general, just how do we increase the diversity of the patrons who frequent the farmers market, as well as the vendors who are represented at the farmers market.
Brandon, don't get too set on the SNAP. The farm bill is being debated now, and they're going to exclude that, so don't just play it by ear.
Yeah, okay. Just trying to be inclusive. All the things we might consider. Then I've listed a few plans and studies. What's in your square, which Marcus just presented on. We have a parking study that shows that we have a pretty significant oversupply of parking in our downtown, especially in the Lincoln Square area. Now that's kind of a different story on a market day because there's a very high concentration of people in this otherwise not very active part of the downtown. But we do get parking revenue or at least when Health Alliance was there from the rentals. So the city does actually generate revenue off the parking lot right now. But that's something that we're taking into consideration because from an economic development perspective, we have basically underperforming parking lots that could be replaced by residences, businesses.
Go up.
Yeah, we don't really need to go up just yet because there's so much surface parking available. So that's something that impacts the farmers market. The limitation of that study is it did not capture Saturday parking trends. So that's actually another data collection point that we're going to need to look at what really is the pattern of parking. Because if we do something like create a short-term parking section and then displace people or expand the footprint of the market, how can we study what the consequences of that would be? There's going to be a good way to do it and lots of bad ways to do it. And I mentioned before the city's facility study. This is just underway. I don't think we've quite picked our consultant yet. So really this is going to be getting underway fully in probably 2019 is when it's really going to be going. Not sure exactly when the conclusion of that will be, but the farmers market will be a part of that total consideration. But as I mentioned before, the farmers market is a very different operation from most other city activities. So even the idea of this as a facility, isn't what most city staff think of. They think of this building and public works and et cetera, but they're not necessarily thinking about that parking lot as an event facility. But that's what it is right now. And of course, the city closed the Civic Center, or will be closing the Civic Center at the end of the calendar year. So that, that's kind of another factor in this conversation as well, or it relates. Financial data, we have, I went over what we have and how we're going to improve that in the next fiscal year, or over the course of the current fiscal year. And You know, one other source of data we identified is that we may be able to generate sales tax data in aggregate. There's rules, we can't, you know, publish people's sales tax information, but we may be able to collect some information on vendors.
Explain.
When you report your sales tax to the state and or the city, that information's aggregated, and certain individuals can get approval from the state and from the city to see that information, but we cannot disclose the details of that information. It has to be,
How would that help you?
because we can aggregate it.
I don't, what's that mean?
That means that you can put all of it together and you can figure out how much roughly was
With your
generated.
brick and mortar, you mean?
With vendors was what we were going
Anybody
to
who
focus on.
collects sales tax.
Because we pay straight to the state.
Mhm.
Right.
Exactly, but all the vendors are, and so we would aggregate that information. That way, when we report, we're not reporting on how Triple S, your sales are versus another, the Moores. It's in aggregate.
But there is a way that you can identify people who sell at the market and the day that they sold the item.
Not the
Sales
day.
tax?
Not the day. But the
Is it
season.
divided out based upon the rate? Because everyone pays, well, what, 3 categories of rates?
I haven't done any detailed analysis on this. It's just, we don't have sales data for vendors. The other way is we can ask for voluntary reports, but we're not confident that's going to result in anything
No, that's
meaningful.
not, you're not getting that.
Yeah, so this is our one other shot at kind of trying to get some information on the total activity of the farmer's market.
You could at least see trends.
Yeah, but we might not work out, as you're saying.
Another suggestion that I learned at the Ag Summit these past few days was potentially getting, if vendors would at least be comfortable disclosing what percentage of their sales tend to be SNAP, because a general that can be extrapolated from there. That wouldn't cover all vendors at this market, but that's another potential source, at least for food products, to get a sense of scale.
Thank you. And then lastly, I mentioned parking counts. We need to do some of those. Also traffic, we can get traffic data or figure out how to collect it.
Just out of curiosity, has
Yeah.
there ever been talk of turning Vine into 1 lane each way after south of Maine? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, I've talked about it, but I don't think it's a priority in our capital improvements plan or anything. It is interesting that, you know, it narrows rapidly just south of the farmer's market, and there isn't, I don't know, it's debatable whether or not there's a need for 4 lanes of traffic. A center left turn lane might function, but I can't recall, this might be still considered a state highway, this part in town. I mean, it's complicated. We have to coordinate with Public Works to raise that conversation. But again, if we're definitely focusing on this site in the future, we want to have that conversation, even if it's just, you know, answering that question of how far in the future before the city's going to take a serious look at this roadway. And then the function of the implementation, you know, of course, the implementing has to happen within the scope of the enabling ordinance, which we're going to go over, then the strategic plan. Again, the constraints, those approvals, funding, and staffing, we have to go get those in order to do anything. We need to get it budgeted if we're going to make use of our fund balance. You know, other ways to get staffing resources would be up volunteering, forming partnerships. It's going to be essential. We have in the room the Land Connection, the Public Health District, Common Ground Food Co-op, our vendors. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to partner, to do more, to accomplish more together. And lastly, we may need to look at fundraising as well. How will the board participate? This is actually just a preview of what's up in your ordinance, but it gives you a sense of the things we really want you to be, that you're charged by the council to ensure that the farmers market stays going in these directions, that we're thinking about growth and considering that we're researching and seeking additional funding opportunities or other support, like those partnerships. We're encouraging public participation through this process, and just participating in the market and the market's programs. we find opportunities to cooperate with other entities. We aren't just going to try to go it alone. We don't have the resources to, honestly. We're going to, try to find opportunities to educate through our programming, coordinating events and outreach, and of course implementing also those goals that are mentioned in the strategic plan, which you can go over separately. So that was a lot, but again, these were your ideas largely that I've just been compiling over the last few months.
So is the plan basically to generate all of this data to then provide the board with information from the public to help people form what types of ideas they might have for facilities and implementation of the different, is that correct? So data gathering is in year 2019. That's my question.
Yeah, data gathering would occur in 19, well, it's market season 19, so we'd have a few months in the year. But we need to start planning now. We need to put together requests for the resources that we're asking to utilize, staffing and some funding clearly. So that has to occur internally in the city. And then we need to be really specific and deliberate about how this might interface with the ongoing facilities study, the conclusion of Market at the Square, or, sorry, what's in your square, etc.
Questions, comments? No? No? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. You're gonna hear more from me.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
you're next up on the agenda, but you're the last piece.
This is the last part of the agenda.
Piece. All right, so now we're going to go over the 2012 ordinance, which established this board, and the 2017 market strategic plan. And then finally, the role of advisory board members in relation to these documents.
I'm going to try to cover these at the same time, at least the role question, as we go through the ordinance. So I really want to start with the ordinance. That's the most important piece, because it established this board back in 2012, after there was a steering committee and the original strategic plan was approved prior to the creation of this board. So the whereases tell a little bit of that history, but the ordinance starts up really after the now therefore be it ordained on the second page. And I'm going to skip around just a little bit. I'm going to start with, in section 1, there's the mission statement. There's going to be a quiz afterwards. You have to have this memorized. It's so easy to remember. I'm going to read it out loud because I really want you to reflect on it. The Market at the Square Advisory Board recognizes the continuation and growth of Urbana's Market at the Square as essential to the vitality of our city. I think that's it's compelling, and it's also consistent with what we were talking about before about how unique of an attraction this is for our downtown. It really is essential. The board fosters a dynamic, entrepreneurial Urbana, helps guide the long-term activities of the market and attainment of its goals as described in the Urbana's Market at the Square strategic plan adopted by City Council on November 7, 2011. That's very specific. And also we have an update to the strategic plan. So I'm going to come back to that, but note that this does specifically refer to the 2011 plan. And creates an environment in which the market's mission to connect the community to local food growers and producers, strengthen the local food economy, provide access to local artisans, and serve as a community gathering place may thrive. So there's a lot in there. But it acknowledges the essential vitality of this market. It acknowledges the entrepreneurial aspect of what the farmers market promotes, that this board's to focus on the long term. That 2011 plan we'll come back to. And then your kind of three main, you have a mission within your mission apparently. And those are connecting, right, community to food, strengthening the food economy, providing access to local artisans, and serving as a community gathering place. Which those last two are pretty consistent with some of the things Rachel was talking about. So I want to make sure you're aware that there's some breadth to this. Page 3 is all about your composition. I won't go into it in detail, but we're doing pretty well. Right now we have Paris resigned, but I don't think the agenda's out, but Mayor Marlin has, it's going to be, it's the right term, not nominating.
Nominating.
It is appointing Gary Taylor, the general manager of Common Ground, to be the new business representative for the advisory board. And I think that happens on Monday, or at least the first vote is Monday. So we're excited to have a strong partnership with a business that is uniquely committed to the success of the farmers market and the community as an owner governed grocery store. So, and again, we'll add number, or we'll approach council about adding number 7 to that list. I don't want to go into the details of the terms or that kind of thing, but we can go back there if you have questions. I'm going to skip ahead to page 4. F and G talk about our meetings. Just want to make sure you're aware, we're supposed to meet quarterly based on this ordinance. And the chair can also call meetings, as can any 5 members. The chair is designated directly by the mayor. And then functions and duties. This is where we get into, it's important to acknowledge this is an advisory board. So your function is inherently limited. Nothing in this ordinance shall be construed as vesting legislative discretion or power in the board. So the duties go on to affirm some of the powers or roles and responsibilities rather that you have on page 5. And these are the ones I listed before. So I'm just going to read the action words in this list. And this kind of gives you a sense of your advisory capacity. Considering, researching, seeking, encouraging, cooperating, offering, coordinating, implementing, and updating. You're considering future growth. You're researching and seeking additional funding and other support, encouraging public participation, cooperating with other entities, offering educational programming, coordinating events and outreach, and then the unique one, implementing strategic plan and updating the strategic plan. So that one's a little bit challenging because the board doesn't necessarily have a lot of capacity to actually implement. So you're generally implementing via those other kinds of activities. You're helping to guide the market as a whole. This is the kind of unusual bit. When I was researching this, I didn't realize that the City Council did not approve the 2017 strategic plan update. But the council did vote to approve the 2011 original strategic plan. And so that's, it's kind of an open question, I guess, about how much authority this body can vest in its update to the plan, but the ordinance does clearly say you can update the plan. So, we want to acknowledge that, but just, I guess, note that there was very concrete council action taken in 2011, and if we want, again, if this body really wants to see something happen in the future, we want to make sure that we're going beyond just an action of the advisory body, that we're making sure that recommendation gets to the council or to another decision-making official who can, take it to the next level.
Well, there was a lot of bloodletting on that one.
Yeah. Well, we're going to acknowledge it as
It was hell.
as this advisory board's, interpretation of the 2011 plan and your update to it, and we don't see any reason to undermine or question that at this point. But it was just something I learned in going over.
Because we went down to 5 priorities.
And you ended up with 7.
Didn't we go down to 5?
I think that's 5, yeah.
Right?
And that was the process I was telling you about.
7, there's 7.
There's 7 now,
Yeah.
but we had 5. But number 2 on the 7 priorities, you got in there somehow from last year, which is good, as far as I'm concerned. At the end of the market summary.
Well, in another sense, it's just we can't completely divorce ourselves or our actions from that 2011 plan. And I'm going to spend some time with it as we go through this process because I haven't really looked at it in detail. I didn't think I needed to, but I'm not sure that the 2017 document fully supersedes the other one. But at the same time, I don't think it's out of alignment necessarily.
As far as those quarterly meetings, since we're going into kind of a different situation here with all this planning and all that, we're probably going to have more either ad hoc meetings or whatever, correct? I don't think
Yeah,
we can do it on a
definitely, yeah.
quarterly basis.
That's
Is
like-
that making sense?
Yes. But we'll maintain, we don't need to amend the ordinance to have more meetings.
I know, I see that, but I'm just saying.
So then the last action, the advisory board that's mentioned is recommending yearly to city council via the market director's annual report. And that actually, this body took that action at its last meeting to approve that annual report. Then there's a provision that allows for subcommittees, but there's a problem with that when it comes to the Open Meetings Act, because as a public body, and I hope you've all, especially the new members, have taken the FOIA, or not FOIA, what do they call it? The Open Meetings Act.
Training.
That
Robert's rules or whatever it's called.
Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
So you should not speak about business that would come before the board and groups of larger than 2 for a body, well, I think this size, yeah,
No,
because we have
that's
9.
correct.
Mhm. So we, that puts a limit on what this board can function. You function as a board, as a group, all together. So when you are convened as a body at a duly called meeting that's been properly noticed, then you can take actions as a board. If 3 of you get together and try to make decisions or have conversations, that needs to be a publicly noticed meeting, otherwise it's not valid or proper. And so you see now, that's the problem with the subcommittee, is if we try to get more than 2 of you together to have a focused conversation, we now need to go through the whole process. We might as well just have a full board meeting, because we're a board and we make decisions, well, I don't, but you make decisions as a board. So we're going to strive to always be inclusive when new information becomes available, make sure all the board members are receiving that information, and more at the same time as much as possible too. So we can do subcommittees, but functionally it's just easier for us to host meetings. An advisory board member or 2 can attend, but generally we want to bring in those other stakeholders, those community organizations or vendors who aren't on the advisory board or whomever. We can have a great big meeting with folks, but we still got to keep that limited down.
Rose Bowl don't count then.
It could happen at the Rose Bowl under certain conditions, but it'd have to be properly noticed.
Did I read here somewhere real quick that we do a report somehow, and I can't find it.
The market director gives an annual report. It's on page 5 after the numbered list. And basically, the advisory board recommends that yearly to the council. So we procedurally, and that's what Brian gave it last month.
Gotcha.
And so that's advanced. And I think we just...
That's typically done in the spring, or when is it done?
It's usually done closer to the end of the season, but because of staff turnover, it happened later
Okay.
than usual. Okay, we're almost done. Page 6, so my last points. Letter L is the budget. You have no formal request for funding. And so there's no funding associated with this board, but it does clearly say necessary training funds for the board will be budgeted out of the market's annual budget. So if we're doing training associated, especially with this new activity, or we're going to do a field trip, we might have to notice it, but we can make funds available for activities of this board from the Farmers Market Fund or possibly the Community Development Department budget, which is also, that's referenced there in the ordinance as well. CD, Suki, myself, staff, and support this board. So I know that was really exciting, but are there any questions? If not, we can
When do
move-
you foresee, he said at the end of the month he's going to have his data in. So when do you foresee getting some of this stuff together? So maybe we start digesting it.
Are you talking about the market in the square?
Right.
Well, right now, when is our next meeting set for?
It would be in 3 months. I apologize, I don't know the date. Did we put it on the agenda?
October, November?
Yeah, it should be in
Because this has
November.
been backed up, this one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
What's in your square has been backed up, yes, a couple of months.
But I mean, this advisory meeting
Yes,
too.
it
is
was supposed to be made in August.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll go back on 408, so that would be plenty of time.
Yeah, so, I mean, we would give an update in November, and if we ever get to a point where it's starting to come together more quickly, then we would call for ad hoc meetings at that point, or the chair would, rather.
It looks like November 14th.
November 14th.
Okay.
And then here is the strategic plan update. I don't really, I mean, there are people in this room who know a lot more about this and how this document came about than I did. It's very simple and clear, I thought. But I think that, you know, we have a need, given, I told you kind of all the reasons why we need to take a little bit different perspective than this visioning process took, the strategic plan. The visioning for the facility is not intended to conflict with this, it's intended to complement it. But we need to answer some questions about our facility and take advantage of some of these opportunities because of all these other events and activities of the city. But it's not intended to defy this. So we'll be looking to the advisory board to help make sure that we're remaining within the bounds of this strategic plan update as we move forward, and that we're going to, you know, the facilities efforts present opportunities to really achieve some of the goals in this document well. So I'm actually not going to go through it page by page with you, but I'm going to just open it up to questions at this point.
Are there any questions? No? I would like to say that, and I started to do this, and I was not involved in the strategic plan update of 2017, so I come in with a clean slate. I have no idea what happened to generate this plan, but I was looking at the ordinance, and I was looking at the strategic plan, and I was trying to mesh them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to take like every single bullet point in the ordinance and see how that was met in the strategic plan, and I'm thinking, I almost see this map being made of how are we fulfilling this goal. So one thing that I don't think I saw in here was anything about funding. So anything about fundraising and so forth. There's lots and lots of stuff about education and so forth, all throughout, spread throughout all of it. But I also think we need to keep this in mind as we look at the data collection process and looking at very specifically targeting the questions and how that relates to the ordinance and how it relates to the strategic plan. And so you have a really nice, tightly knit idea of what that report's going to look like at the end. So those are my thoughts as I was looking through this stuff.
Thank you.
All right.
For those of us that are new, can you just go over what happened? Is there a timeline or something explain?
Well, roughly, I mean, the plan hadn't been updated since 2011, and as I noted when I was talking about the ordinance, there was a steering committee that preceded this board, and that steering committee proposed the strategic plan, which was adopted by the city council. So, you know, in one way, it's good to know that the 2011 document, you know, this board wasn't in existence yet and hadn't been functioning. So it was making some guesses, I guess, about how this board would function. Natalie Kenny Marquez, as market coordinator, initiated this process to update this in, I want to say 2016.
She started out with surveys.
Yes. Yeah, so there was public input and a lot of discussion that led to this summarized document. And I think one of the reasons it was left light was because it wasn't brought to council for approval. So it's a plan update. It's, I don't know, it's not a strategic plan. It's a strategic plan update. So it's sort of like an accessory to the 2011 plan. It clarifies and highlights and really just has it's a better expression of the board's intent of focus, I guess. This is how I look at it.
All right. Any other questions? Well, there is no further business in front of our board. I believe we've covered all of our agenda items. So with that, I will call this meeting adjourned.